this organization was pretty heavily involved in trying to support interim funding for the ferry during the past couple of years of COVID tourism destruction, and border closures and so on and so forth. So Ryan and I became very good friends at that point. His loss was a shock when I learned of his untimely passing via Edna, who's also a very good friend of his. So I wanted to take a moment and remember him as a wonderful human being, a good guy, and a very stalwart member of our community and its economy. So his absence is going to be felt for quite some time. We finally were able to communicate and get a speaker, Marty Brewer, today. Marty, welcome. And I see he's about halfway through his chow, so I'm gonna talk for another couple of minutes and make sure he gets at least enough calories to carry on for the rest of the meeting. Any officers or committee chair reports?
Sure.
Seeing and hearing none. Edna? Go, I'm sorry?
We're almost to that time of year where, as outgoing president, I'm chairman of the nominating committee.
Yes.
And any of you are welcome to volunteer to be on the board, to be in charge of the communications, or anything you'd like. So.
And our qualifications are few and the bar is very low.
Well, I don't know. Speak for yourself.
Well, I forgot to say no when somebody asked me to be president this year, so I can tell you from personal experience, the qualification bar is pretty darn low. But anyway, it's been a delight. Thank you, Edna, for mentioning that. We will reach out and touch various and sundry people. Debbie?
In the absence of member Matthew Rainwater, I want to announce the second annual Pennies for Quarters Veterans Cup that will be held on August 13th. So if we have any golfers that want to put a team together, that is the date. It'll be out at Dungeness, and we are looking for sponsors. And all the money raised will go to fund the additional land development and building of the tiny houses for veterans.
And the day again is?
August 13th.
August 13th, okay, thank you, appreciate that. Anybody here for the first time? We'd like to embarrass our new guests and ask you to introduce yourself. I don't think I see anybody whose face I haven't seen before. Tim, you want to introduce your lovely daughter?
You want to introduce yourself? All right. I brought my oldest daughter, Sydney. She's out of school for the summer, and she heard who the speaker was and wanted to come see him. So,
All right.
So here we are. We came to listen. Thanks for joining us.
You're getting a look at.
Well, if the superintendent has given you a hard time, now's your chance to give some of it back.
Welcome, Cindy.
Great to have you here. Marty, I'll go ahead and hand the microphone to you and give us the state of affairs in K through 12 and anything that's on your mind. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, well, thank you. If I speak like this, can you hear me, or do you want me to use mic? All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jim, for reaching out. I apologize. Jim started to reach out latter part of last week, and I didn't get the message until yesterday afternoon. So I don't have a formal presentation scheduled today. I just want to have, a conversation, share kind of some updates on some things we're working on in the school system and some challenges that we have moving forward, and make it interactive. If you had any questions, I'm here to answer those questions. So I want to start with, I'll try to stay in the middle here.
You're fine.
The school year summary. This year, we completed school last Wednesday, June 15th. and it was a challenging year. I think a lot of the challenges that you're faced with in your business, we had in our school system this year. Out of the gate, we had a local commitment from the top, I'm talking the board, down through every member of our school system to get our kids back in school and keep them in school. Last school year, which was the 2021 school year, we completed the whole year in what we called, we started as virtual, and then we transitioned to hybrid, and that was the best we could do 2 years ago. This last year that we just completed, the 21-22 school year, we were in school every day, 180 days, and got our kids to school. Now, that was a Herculean effort by all. An example, we didn't have enough school bus drivers. So we had to, at the beginning of the school year, we had to consolidate our routes and remove 3 routes because we were down staff. At the beginning of the year, we had 3 less drivers than we needed and no subs. And so from the very get-go, our staff was working to try to consolidate routes, make it so that we could get kids to school as close to on time as possible. I had to make some really tough decisions right out of the gate. Had to send notice to some families, we're gonna get your child to school, but it may be a little bit late, just simply because that was where we were at. We worked really hard, an example of what it took to keep our kids in school this year on the transportation side, we have a mechanic that has a CDL and is a licensed bus driver. Our director is a licensed bus driver, and one of our dispatchers was a licensed bus driver. And so those folks, I'm gonna tell you that they probably drove 75% of the year. And without that, we're not getting kids to school. And so their personal commitment to make sure that, hey, yeah, I'm gonna be the director, but I'm also gonna drive the bus, and then I'll stay late to do my work, or I'm a dispatcher, I'll come in and do that on the fly as well, or a mechanic, how that goes. That's just the personal commitment it took. In the springtime, we, at the middle school, there was a day where we had, and this is very common, we had 23 staff members out. 23. And that's nearly half of the staff assigned to that school. And so again, we didn't close school. We made, we made lemonade rather than closing our schools. So that took directors, that took me, that took, anybody and everybody that had a teaching certificate to get to a school and keep our schools open. I am proud. I am really proud of the fact that we in Port Angeles did not have a major closure the whole year. There were 2 examples of classroom closures. We had one, and they were both in the spring. We had to close 2 classrooms at Roosevelt because of COVID activity, and we had to close 2 classrooms at Jefferson because of COVID activity. Outside of that, there were examples of quarantining students and staff in specific classrooms, but I'm talking just closures. We only had those 2 all year long. And that took an effort by everybody in our organization. I have to give our community a lot of credit. In the fall, when things were looking bleak for us, I didn't know, it was day to day. Every morning I'd get up and I would think, is today the day we have to close schools because I don't have staff? But in the fall, we sent a letter out to our families and said, hey, if you want to be an emergency substitute teacher, we need you now. We had over 50 responses to that. And so we worked with individuals that didn't have a teaching certificate. Basically, we were looking for somebody that could pass a background check, you know, no spots on their history, and also has an interest in, you know, teaching kids. That's what we had to, and so we hired some emergency substitutes that met those two classifications so that we could keep our schools open. And without those 53 people that responded last fall, there was no way we were gonna stay open. And so, big props to that as well. The enrollment this year, and that was one thing that Jim wanted me to talk about. This last year, we just finished up our average, and how a school is financed is through a 10-month average for enrollment. And our average for our 10 months over the school year was 3,416 students. Okay? And pre-COVID, before COVID hit us, we were at 3,525 as our average. So we're still down, not 100, about 110 students. Okay? But we feel fortunate with that, because there are still districts that are down 4, 5, 6%. I think the statewide average this last year was 4%. So we're happy that more than half of our students have returned. In, like I say, 1920, we had 3,525 students. Last school year, not this most recent, but the 21-22 school year, when COVID was unknown to all of us, we dropped to 3,277. So we lost 250 kids that one year. And so, and they returned over time, but having a 50% or greater than 50% return this last year was very much appreciated, and glad that folks trusted us with their most prized possession, their students, or their children. So we're on the path to recovery. We have to look at the glass half full and learn from the COVID experience, and that's what we're doing. One thing that we did that COVID really forced us down that path, we had already started the planning, but we have our own virtual school now. It's called Seaview Academy, if you haven't heard about it. It is 100% virtual. Families can enroll, not just in Port Angeles, they can enroll anywhere in the state of Washington. We are authorized, we're called a multi-district service provider, meaning any student across the state of Washington can enroll in the Port Angeles School District Seaview Academy. And that's here to stay. Pre-COVID, I was looking at numbers around our enrollment and asking the question, where are our students going? And we had, round numbers, approximately 125 students in our K-12 system that were homeschooling. This is pre-COVID. And then about 125 students that were going to, we call them ALE, or virtual schools elsewhere. They were going to the Forks Virtual School. They were going to the OMAC Virtual School. They were going to the Toppenish Virtual School. And so being a business person, like, we got to create a business model where we can compete in that world. And so we started, now, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right? We started our work on building Seaview Academy September of 2019. And, it takes school systems anywhere from, 1 to 2 years to plan a new program. But I charged our staff in September of 2019, we can't keep doing this. I want to build the virtual school, and I want us to launch it January of 2020. And guess what? We did it. Days before the first, we started hearing about this COVID in the Seattle, King County area, we launched our virtual school with 50 kids. So I'll tell you, without that, Port Angeles School District will look very, very different, during our COVID times. Because in the middle of the peak of the COVID experience, we had nearly 1,000 students in our virtual academy. Now, a lot of those kids were local, so they chose to go there rather than a hybrid. But so we have our own ALE program, which is Alternative Learning Experience. right here in Port Angeles, fully vetted through the state of Washington. We can enroll a student from, it happens all the time, from Seattle, and enroll them in our program, collect a state apportionment, and serve their basic educational needs. And I think do it in a better manner than a lot of the ALE programs out there. So we're the new kid on the block. We're not Forks. Forks, has 4,000 or 5,000 kids in their ALE program because of COVID. This year we had, I think the largest number we had during the school year was about 300 students in our ALE program. So, but we're building it, and it will be a wise investment for this school district moving forward, because there are families that are looking for that as an option even pre-COVID. They would rather learn in a virtual setting. And
Does the state reimburse you on the same level as classroom attendance?
yeah, so an ALE program, it's about 500, round number, about $500 a student less than what you get for brick and mortar. But you do get state apportionment, yes. Yep. And the concept there is, from what I understand around the ALE apportionment being about $500 a head less, is you don't have the overhead to keep buildings open. So, but I fully anticipate our enrollment recovering to pre-COVID in the next 12 to 18 months. If it's not our local students, then it will be students across the state of Washington that we're now competing in that world. So, yes.
What would the number be if you didn't count outside of district enrollees?
This year we had approximately, well, it depends month to month, but you can count on 50 to 60 students from across the state joined our school. Yeah. So the goal this year for us internally was 100. We didn't hit that, but we did do some pretty innovative things, because it's hard to get the word out for a new system like that. But we did some advertising in King County, because what I had saw in last September is Seattle School District said, hey, we're not going to have a virtual school this year. And so I knew that families would be looking for that option in King County, so we created with the help of a local video producer, we created a commercial that went on King 5. And we started pulling some kids from King County, and majority of our students came right out of the out-of-district enrollees came from the Seattle Public Schools. So, yes, Jim.
Can I dig a little deeper on that?
Yeah.
ALE, as you've described it, sounds fairly competitive. There's an element of competition for students in the virtual learning world.
Yep.
What is that competition based on? Is it based on curriculum? In other words, is the superior curriculum of your school district's situation attracting these kids from elsewhere outside Clallam County, or how does that work?
I think all the ALE programs really use the same 3 or 4 curriculum providers. So it's not about curriculum. I think it's about the student experience. And if you're a good ALE program, now Forks, their ALE program, theirs is based on they've just been around, and they have reputation, right? But for us, we're trying to create an experience that will set us apart.
So you're establishing a little different brand.
Yes.
EAC.
What we're trying to do is our experience is, yes, it's virtual, but we want to have in-person opportunities for our local students so that they can come together and learn to socialize with one another. It's not a requirement, but it's an option that our teachers are on site and that's different from Forks. If you go to Forks, their teachers are teaching from Maryland or Florida. They can teach from anywhere. We hire local teachers, real teachers that are ours, that are not contracted through some firm. There are people that we hold accountable to our philosophy. And so what we really want to strive to is, like, we're going to set ourselves apart because, you know, my concern, and it won't be a concern with every family, but if you're 100% virtual, like, you know, as we develop as adolescents and grow, like, that social interaction is critical. And so bringing students and families together to, you know, learn together from time to time, once a week, is, in my opinion, a good thing. And now you can say, well, how can you do that in King County, or how can you do that for a student in Spokane? My vision is, or our vision is, well, if we have, you know, the caseload in a virtual school is 35 students to one teacher, but if we have, you know, 25, 30, 35 students from Seattle, or from Spokane, or from the Tri-City area, like, we'll hire a teacher from there. And then that teacher can go to a public library once a week and say, hey, you know, I want you to come in for X. So we're not there yet, but that's the vision that we want to try to capitalize on a market that may be a little different than a lot of virtual academies. Not a requirement, because that families wouldn't appreciate that, but an option for families. Yes, sir.
Could you recount your philosophy for us then? I don't think we've heard that before here.
My philosophy with regards to...
You said your philosophy.
On, well, the philosophy that what I was trying to get at there, Brian, was, in my opinion, some in-person learning or social interaction.
So it's not a written philosophy for the district?
No. It's like just the philosophy of, you know, building a new program.
Oh.
Is having something that's different than maybe you'll get at Forks, where it's 100% virtual. You never have any
Yeah,
in-person
I understood
learning.
that. I thought you said you had a philosophy, so we're interested in hearing what that was.
Sorry about that. Okay, so, so the school year went really well, I think, and my hope is we'll be back to continued more normal activities. From the, we are, you know, from the student experience, beyond teaching and learning, we knew this year that, you know, for adults, and I said this over and over again, adults in the room, we all know that school is really important and kids need to be in school, and so that was our commitment, to have school every day. But from a student perspective, like all the other stuff that they do, you know, like athletics, band, orchestra, choir, you know, drama performances, you know, all of those other things are critical to the development of our kids. And so our staff worked really hard this year. We were one of the first, and maybe one of the very few schools across the state of Washington that last fall had a, you know, during our homecoming week, we had an assembly for our kids. We did it outside, but we had it. You know, I always say, let's get to yes. It's easy to say no. Jim, you called yesterday. No, I can't be there. But I'm gonna get to yes. It's really important that we learn to get to yes. How can we make it work? And so last fall, we worked with the county health department, and we created a scenario where we could have an assembly. And then we worked with the county health department. We partnered with the tribe. We partnered with a lot of other businesses, and we were able to do a dance last fall. You know, seems maybe small to like us, but for the students, like, and where they were really struggling with their own mental health, they needed that. And so we had the tribe out of Jamestown. They brought in a huge tent and set that up for us, working with other partners, and we were able to have an outdoor dance last, I think it was October. Nobody else was doing that. Nobody. When other schools were closing down, there was an outbreak of Omicron in January. And we had a wrestling tournament scheduled on a day in January. Don't ask me what day, but it was scheduled for a day in January. We had 10, 12 teams come into town. Other districts were, you know, because of the Omicron being 2,400 cases per 100,000, they were shutting wrestling down. we had our tournament, but we did it differently. We worked with the county. We said, hey, you know, if you're gonna come to this meet, one, there would be no spectators. We didn't have any spectators, because it's about the students, okay? And so we had all the teams come, and every team had to test all of their student athletes prior to showing up. And then you had to wear your mask on the site, and if you had a problem with that, I personally talked with each superintendent and said, if your coach has a problem with any of the guidelines that we have, because we're opening our doors when others are closing it, don't come. Everybody came, and we were able to do it successfully. This spring, you know, we had our first indoor assembly in nearly 2.5 years at Port Angeles High School. We had the prom, we had graduation, we had all of these things, drama experiences. We had band, orchestra, and choir performances. So we got back to very normal events. And that, to our organization, was really, really important, because our students, not all, but our students are struggling with their own mental health. And from a teaching and learning side, we know the investment in that moving forward is so very important, but the day-to-day, our kids need wins. And so that's what we got. And I am super proud, you know, to represent this organization from the board down at our commitment to make that happen. That's not common. It was not common in the school world this year. Just as the year before, it wasn't common to start bringing back our students before anybody else was bringing them back. That's what, you know, it's easy to lose sight on what we did. Back in the 21-22 school year, 2021 school year, when nobody else was going to school, nobody. We brought back our special ed students in September of 2020. They were first to come back, and they came back in mid-September, right in the middle of all the unknowns of the pandemic. We got them back in school. A couple weeks later, it was the first day I cried on the job. Our kindergartners came back, October 5th of 2020. They came back with their little mask on, and teachers were there, and we were greeting our kids. What a day. But it didn't just happen by chance. A lot of work went into making that work. And then we brought back second and third graders. And then by semester time, we brought back our secondary students. 80%, this is a fact, 80% of the students across the state of Washington did not go back to school, 80, did not go back to school until April 19th of 2021. And why? They were ordered by the governor. We started bringing back our students nearly 9 months earlier. And so at one point in time, on the west side of the mountains, not the east, on the west side of the mountains, there was 2 school districts of size. Smaller school districts were pulling it off. It was a little easier around the COVID times. But White River School District and Port Angeles School District were the 2 districts that were going to school. Okay? And that was before SQUIM, you know, started opening their doors. So I'm really proud of the work that we've had to put in to make all of this work for our kids and our families. And, you know, I know it's not enough, but we worked hard to make it work. Yes, Brian?
Marty, I really appreciate all you've done here in Port Angeles, and I look at what was going on statewide with funding during those years, the additional supplemental funding that came in, and how on TV in August of 2020 they showed huge warehouses being built in Fife for food, including a whole distribution system with trucks, managers, all that sort of thing. And it was funded by the state, but that doesn't benefit us here. And when I see the state publishing now that they're collecting $18,172 per student, I have to ask you, are we getting our fair share of that?
You know, I'm gonna start with, I think what you may be getting at. We had ESSER funds, federal funds that came to the school district to keep our doors open. And it was a lot of money. It's a lot of money. We still have well over $5 million of ESSER funds that we have to allocate this next school year to address learning loss. our district used those dollars the way they were intended to use. Now, you can argue too much money coming from the feds, that's an argument for a different time, but the money that was allocated to us through the feds, we used to do exactly what I believe the intent was, is get our kids back in school. And so we are using our ESSER dollars to purchase more staff, to address learning loss now. So to answer the next part of your question around apportionment and allocation of resources, the state in 2018 went to what's called regionalization. And they fund schools based on a prototypical model, and they assessed, the legislature assessed the cost of living in regions across the state of Washington. And so they went to what they call regionalization. And like, for instance, King County schools are, generally speaking, they get regular apportionment, what we get, times 18%. So they get 18% more money than we get at the local level. So there's 18% regionalization districts, there's 12% regionalization districts, and there's 6% regionalization districts. We are not 18, we're not 12, and we're not 6. To answer your question, no. I don't like, the thing that kind of sets me apart is, like, sometimes, like, a superintendent may not speak their mind. I'll speak my mind. I don't like the regionalization model. I think, our kids out here deserve the very best. And I think when we went away from, the statewide salary system, and transitioned to this regionalization concept and allocating a flat fee to every district, based on basic apportionment, it's a challenge. We can't compete. If you're a teacher or an administrator and you want to drive a little bit each day, we can't compete with an 18% multiplier in the North Kitsap School District. North Kitsap has 18%. Chimacum has 12%. Sequim has 6%. We have nothing. We can't compete there. And I'll be quite honest and frank with you, Brian. Like, our people of Port Angeles, we're the gem, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to any other, school system or community, but Port Angeles is the centerpiece of the peninsula, right?
Yep.
Like, we are the hub, and we don't have the regionalization that Sequim has. We don't have what Chimacum has. We don't have what Port Townsend has. Like, we can't compete with that salary, and so, our people that work in Port Angeles are very proud, and we've always tried to take care of our people and be comparable, if not, better than neighboring school districts, because we are that district, right? But we can't do that anymore, Brian.
I know.
And so, I am frustrated with the regionalization model. Personally, I think a legislature will be really ticked that I'll say this, but I think there will be a McCleary too because of regionalization. We're on that track. And I'm not gonna be the one to personally sue the state, but there are districts that are very, very angry about that model and the inequities on what it brings. If you can make 6% more in SQUIM as a teacher and there's a position, why wouldn't you?
Well,
because your salary relates to your pension. Your top five highest paying years. So in theory, and it hasn't reached this yet, Brian, but in theory, we'll be the training grounds for these other districts and more experienced teachers because they can make more there.
What's the qualification for regionalization?
That's a great question.
You always hate my questions.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think they did a statewide calculation of the cost of living, and I think it was really during that time contingent upon home values. I think, but it's a big, complex process that I'm not really sure how they get there, because, you know, you look at our cost of living out here, not cheap by any means. You know, if you can find a home to buy, or you can find a home to rent, really expensive. So the regionalization model, I think, needs to be revisited at the state level. And when that happens, I'll be very much appreciative. So I wanna move in, how much time, what time do I have to be done? Oh, you said 8.
Keep rolling, Marty, and
Okay.
we can keep you another 15 minutes if you have time.
Okay, so I'm gonna roll through that first one. I'm really proud of the work we did to get our kids in school, so hopefully that rings really true to you.
Yep.
But I wanna move into capital improvements. So you should have, if you're a Port Angeles resident, you should have received a flyer in the mail last week that updates you on our capital collections. Round number, we've collected since we passed our election February of 2020. We have collected round number about $17 million. That money sits in the bank, the county treasurer's office, and we are collecting those funds until we have enough money secured, and I can't tell this story enough. We can't take the Stevens project to bid until we have the money secured to honor the contract that we get from a contractor. So, patience is a virtue here. I get asked the question all the time, we passed this in 2020, I'm not seeing any work at Stevens Middle School. Well, because the state won't allow us to take it to bid until we have the money secured. And for us, there's no interest. That's the advantage of a capital levy, is we collect the funds, we put it in the bank, AKA, or the bank. And it sits there and until we have enough money to take the project to bid. So we will be building or taking the project to bid for Stevens in the 24-25 school year, when we've collected all of the local funds over the 5-year capital projects levy. I am really happy to report to you, because I know this is a big deal for every taxpayer, including myself, but when we did our campaign when we had our campaign in the fall of 2020, we promoted, because one thing that I heard from many members across the community is, we can't have these high and low tax rates, and, you know, I'm on a fixed income and I can't afford to have my taxes go up by 50% and then go down by 50%. I need a flat tax rate. And so during that campaign, if you remember, we talked about a combined tax rate between the EP&O, which is the Educational Programs and Operations levy, which is operations, and then the capital, combined tax rate of $4.12. I know for Jim that probably rings a bell because you remember everything. $4.12. That was a $2.62 tax, $2.62 tax for capital, $1.50 for the EP&O. I am super happy to report that this year, if you're a Port Angeles resident, you are paying for the capital $2.40 per thousand, and for the EP&O $1.29, for a combined of $3.69 compared to $4.12. And so that answers the next question. Well, we've seen an 11% hike in assessed valuations in the Port Angeles community, so the district has to be rolling in the cash. Nope. When we file a resolution with the state, with the county, we have a fixed number, and it's based on the total collected, not based on the millage rate. And so as the AV goes up, millage rate goes down. Doesn't mean you pay less, but it goes down. And you know, so we are collecting what we stated we were going to collect. It's right around $10 million a year for the capital, and about $5.5 million for the EP&O that we collect annually. So the rate has been well below what we anticipated, and that's because of the AV. Okay. The capital improvements right now, Mike sits on that team. Thank you for sitting on our PACAC, which is Capital Advisory Committee that works on behalf of the board, and it has community members, and Mike's one of those community members. But we have designed, if you remember, a part of the campaign, we first step was we wanted safety vestibules in all of our elementary schools completed. Second step was we wanted play fields on the east side of the city, which is Monroe Fields, That's designed, not implemented yet. And step 3 is the Stevens Middle School project. People ask me all the time, well, why you do that? Well, because I knew how we are in these times around when we vote for something, we want to see something, right? And so in year 1, we did the right thing by investing in our schools and building safety vestibules. If you've never seen it, go to any of our elementary schools. And this is very important in today's educational world, i.e. what happened in Texas just a few weeks ago. You know, we have controlled access to all of our elementary schools, meaning our doors, our exterior doors are locked. There's one main entrance. You can walk in that main entrance, and if you show your credentials and you're okay to be in our school, we'll press a button and we'll buzz you through into what we call the heart of the school. And so that is my next topic is about safety, but that's unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at that, that's 21st century learning at that point. That's 21st century schools and facilities, is to have that controlled access. We implemented safety vestibules in all 5 elementary schools. And so we control who comes in and who doesn't come in by way of that. That was year 1. Year 2, we designed the Monroe fields. Those fields are now designed. We took the project out to bid just a couple months ago. It came in really high, about $500,000 over our budget. So we didn't honor that contract. We're gonna take it back out next spring when contractors are hungry looking for work, and try it again. And maybe a different philosophy, but you know, we are excited about that. And most recently, our board has authorized the negotiation of a design team to help us start the design phase of Stevens Middle School. And that will soon be announced in the next couple months when we get that contract negotiated. So progress is there, we're working at it. All of the money, 99.99% of the money is sitting in the bank, you know, for us to access when it's time to start working. And that will be soon. The last piece I wanted to talk about, which is very prevalent in schools and discussion today around safety. You know, and I don't have to speak to the why. Unfortunately, we continue to see events happen in schools and places of worship and, you know, grocery stores, etc. But we have proactive strategies and reactive strategies in our school system. Proactive include things like we have committed to, in our system, to what's called social emotional learning. And really that's about, you know, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your basic needs are not met, you can't learn. We all know that. And so, you know, that's something that we've really invested in our school system. And it's come at a cost. It's hard work because it kind of changes the culture of teaching and learning. But we are really working to address the social emotional health of our students and investing in our students to help them with some things they may be you know, struggling with. And that's all about getting to know your student. Okay? And that is, in my opinion, the greatest proactive strategy. Because if you think about all these unfortunate events that happen across our nation, typically there's a red flag somewhere. And somebody saw something, or somebody read something. So, you know, we want to know our kids. We want to know our kids, we want to know our families, so that if something's off, we speak about it. Okay? And so, you know, we invest in the social emotional learning of our students. We've adopted curriculum, and that's just an investment that we've made. We've also invested when an event does happen, and this happened in the spring, where a threat is made, a significant threat is made within our schools. We have what we use another assessment, which is called the Salem-Kaiser Threat Assessment. It's out of Salem-Kaiser in Oregon. It was created in that school system. But basically, it's an assessment that you can give that assesses the threat that this individual may pose to themselves, the others, or their community. And that's not just school staff. We invite law enforcement, we invite counselors, we invite anybody that, parents, grandparents, anybody that's a part of that child's life. We sit down and do a thorough assessment so that we're not saying, I don't think they're a threat. We're using a tool to determine, are they a threat or not a threat? If they're a threat, then we can work with our system, within our systems, to provide some support for that family. So, so that's another, important change in our system, to be able to assess, what, a student that's struggling may really need. We have reactive strategies as well. You've heard about those, lockdowns and fire drills and all of those pieces. But we think that one of the most important strategies that we use is, knowing our kids and talking about it if you see something that just simply doesn't look or feel right. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question about HB 1941 that was passed in the spring, and regarding that, active shooter drills have to be age appropriate, and it seems very vaguely worded. Have you reviewed that, and how do you move forward to make sure that all the schools are in compliance with that particular?
Yeah, that is vaguely worded, so we're still trying to assess, like, what does that developmentally appropriate mean? We have had active shooter drills in this system before at the high school, and we will continue to work with law enforcement to provide those opportunities. Our strategy for an active shooter in our schools is really aligned to best practice, which is, when a threat is determined on our campus, and we do practice this 3 times a year, we go into, it could be an external threat or it could be an internal threat. We go into what we call lockdown. Lockdowns came out of Columbine. Columbine in 1999, I think, is what year that was.
April 20th, 1989.
Yeah, thank you. In 1999, school systems went to what called lockdowns, and so we operated from that premise for now a couple of decades. But then the Sandy Hook shooting that happened, I think, in 2015, if I remember right, that changed the whole game around locking down. Now what's taught in schools and what we teach in our schools, and we haven't actually executed this with students yet, is run, hide, fight. That is the most, or that's the practice that is the practice of choice now. So it's pretty simple. If a threat comes on our campus, the initial call is lockdown. We lock our doors, lock our exteriors, lock the classroom doors, and now it changes from I hide in a room and I just sit and wait for help to arrive. It's now I have to assess as a teacher, because every teacher, every principal, every person is in a different location in proximity to the threat, right? And so that's the hard part. It used to be, we're gonna tell you what to do. We're gonna go lock down, shut your blinds, shut your windows, lock your door, hide in front of the room, sit quiet. Now we have to really think on our feet, and we've gotta get our folks to learn, to be comfortable around thinking on my feet and assessing what is happening in the school in proximity to where I'm at. And then implementing, do I run? If I have a safe run, and this is how simple it is, do I have a safe path to run away from the threat? Okay? If the answer is yes, do it. If I can't run safely, then I hide. That's, your door's locked, you go in front of the room, you put desks and everything in front of the door, and you try to, wait it out. And then at last resort, if there's a threat coming at you, you have to fight. Not you don't have to. That's the third step. You have to be comfortable with that, but you have to fight. And so, that's at last resort. The data around school shooters is really, with the exception of Sandy Hook, in the most recent, they don't breach doors. So doors are a big thing for us, and that's why we've invested in that safety wheel concept, because if they're a shooter coming to a campus, time is of the essence. And typically they have 2 to 5 minutes to carry out the whole act, and so they're not looking to breach doors. And that is very, that's the research. That's the research around school shooters. Sandy Hook was different. They did breach a door. There was a safety vestibule, and they did, get into the school. Outside of that, very rarely do you see a door being breached. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what percentage of the children in public school are from single parent households, and mostly young males, because what we're seeing when some people have been white young males in our culture today seem to degrade that particular thing, and they're not having a single parent household, usually run by the mother, not a father. So how do young males who are the aggressive ones who are committing these acts, how are you handling that with our today's culture?
Marty, can I be rude and just interrupt for a little admin stuff here? It's 8:27. If you're available for another 15 minutes,
Okay.
can I have a
I make a
motion?
motion that
I
we
second.
take a minute.
Okay, moved and seconded to extend 15 minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Let me just see, yeah, I have time.
Okay.
I can't give you a percentage of single parent households. I don't have that. I could find it, but I don't have it at my fingertips right now. What we've done in our system to help families whether that be a single father or a single mother. Typically, as we know, to make ends meet in today's world, a single income family home is pretty difficult. And so we've hired what we call, and some can be critical of this, but I really appreciate my board for thinking outside the box. In the summer of 2019, we hired the very first navigator that I'm aware of in a school system across the state of Washington. And a navigator is a person, it's like a medical practitioner's navigator. You see them at NOAN, you see them at the hospital. Basically what they do is they help families that are struggling, and single parent households can be in that circumstance. They help them with meeting their basic needs, if they need that help. So, our navigator will help a family to, find money to pay a bill, or help a family with clothing needs, or help a family with food needs. So it's all about the things preparing you to be a learner. Okay, that's what our navigators do. We partnered with NOAN, and NOAN saw how beneficial this navigator position was. So they wrote a grant that they bought a Winnebago bus for a clinic on wheels, and that was really for the school district. It has other needs or other uses as well. But in a part of that grant, they saw how important the navigator was to meeting the emotional, physical, and mental well-being of our kids and families. That in that grant, they got additional dollars for the school system to have additional navigators. So we have now 3 navigators because of NOAN's grant, that now they go out, work with families to help families with whatever they need to live life, to prepare their students to come to school and be learners. The other side of that that'll answer your question maybe indirectly is we partner with NOAN, and NOAN has that clinic on wheels, and that clinic on wheels goes to, I don't think they would like the fact I call it a clinic. I don't think they can call it that, but I can, because I'm not in the medical profession. But they go to each of our schools, all 8 schools, and they sit in front of that school for at least a half a day. And there's an opportunity to see a doctor if you need to see a doctor, or most importantly, mental health. We have mental health therapists that are on that bus, that known employees, that if the proper protocols are and the paperwork's filled out and parent approval, we have sessions that happen right there in that bus, right on our campus, for students that need mental health therapy. So that's a model that that is really important to get back to that social, emotional, and the mental health of our kids and families. But you know, we're investing a lot in that model to help families that may come from a single income, you know, or a single parent home. Yeah, so I hope I at least indirectly answered that question. Yes, sir. Hi.
How's it going? What can you say about budget looking forward? You suggested you have the FTEs coming back.
Yeah.
What's your sense of the overall operating budget, I'd say, primarily?
Yeah, so we have, you know, unless our enrollment completely recovers this next year, we will be looking at reduction in force spring of next year. We've been able to keep our staff, majority of our staff employed by way of the federal dollars that came, and we justify that in the form of learning loss, addressing the learning loss. But if that 125 students don't return next year, we will be looking at fairly significant reduction in force spring of next year. So, yeah. And, you know, that comes after, you know, in year one, 250 students down, which is a healthy reduction in our operating budget. And again, the only way we've been able to piece this together and keep this together is the federal ESSER funds that came by way of our system. But I think there are some school systems that use that dollar as it was intended, and there are other systems that did not. We've used it as it was intended. Get your students back in school, keep them in school, and address the learning loss. And that's where we're at. Addressing the learning loss, that's real. You know, the 18 months that, or not 18, but you know, 9 to 12 months that our students spent in the virtual world, 100%. There is regression there. But because of our commitment for returning our SPED students early, our learning loss for our SPED population is far less than the state average. In fact, it almost parallels where we were pre-COVID. So we're really happy about that. For non-SPED students, we have seen a regression in student performance. But we're on it, we know about it, we know where the pockets are, we know what our students need, and our principals are working really well with their leadership teams in the building to disclose, hey, we need this additional resource to address students with this need, and that's what we use the ESSER funds for.
So SPED equals special education? Did I
Yes, I'm
create
sorry.
that? Oh, that's okay.
Yes, special education, yep. So, yeah, so we'll see where our numbers come in, Jeff, at the, you know, this next school year, but there's likely reductions in force and system reductions next spring. And depending on what the enrollment does, those could be fairly significant or fairly insignificant. Yes?
Marty, what you were talking about earlier about the COVID safety measures and so forth made me think about school safety in a more expansive way. School safety is not just physical security and access control for, you know, individuals that want to do harm to school kids and teachers and stuff, but it's also germs. Do you have a set of lessons learned that can be communicated to our county board of health and other school districts about what went right and what could have been done differently and or better, so that next time one of these pandemics happen, we won't be caught off guard in the, you know, and this is not a value judgment. I don't think anybody in the world expected a pandemic like what we've just gone through. So talk a little bit about that aspect of school safety, if you would.
So, well, the only way hey, I want to start by saying Dr. Berry in this county, I know she had to make some impossible decisions. But when it came to like running our schools, now I'm not talking about restaurants and all that. When it came to running our schools, Dr. Berry was personally committed, as committed as I was, to get our kids back in school. So we had common ground there. And she would do anything, you know, to work with me as the leader of our system to keep our kids, to get our kids in school and keep them in school. So I have, you know, from that perspective, Jim, like I have nothing but admiration for what Dr. Berry did to keep our students safe and in schools. And that was from the get-go. When the governor closed the schools, I remember Dr. Berry in that day in, what was it, March 17th, I think it was, 2020. You know, she was disappointed in that. She felt like we could have kept our schools open, at least until we couldn't during that time. So, but lessons learned for me, and this I'm not trying to be political in any way, shape, or form, but unfortunately these things get politicized. For us, you know, we made it through Delta and Omicron, and Delta, if you remember last September, 1,200 cases per 100,000, which was high for us. And if you look at the school metric, anything above 100 is considered high. And so once you reach 250, they said during that time you really shouldn't be in school. But we were at 1,200, and we were still in school. Then we went through Omicron, which was 2,400 cases per 100,000 in January. We were still in school. We were on wrestling tournaments, all that kind of stuff. What I learned is this. The mitigation strategies that we implemented in our schools this year, where we were in school 100% of the time, worked. Because during Omicron and during Delta, each of them more contagious than the last, we saw next to no transmission in the schools.
Wow.
Yes.
Say that again.
Less than 1% that we could prove. Now, you can't prove it all. But we invested, we had to contact trace, we had to, we were like a health clinic, operating within our schools this last year from time to time. But, so we managed, we knew every positive case that came on our campus that was a confirmed positive. Through the springtime, before removing the mask, next to no proven transmission within our schools, less than 1%. That's big. I mean, so we had a cleaning protocol, we had a physical distancing protocol, and we had a masking protocol. Those were the big ones for us. And like I say, next to 0% transmission rate in our schools. So a family could send their kid to school and be fairly certain that given those circumstances, they're probably, even if there's another student in class that has it, we were able to get through it. The other side of it, Jim, was the filtration system. Even though we have older schools and we couldn't use the MERV 13 filters, we had our systems running 100% of the time. Schools are designed different. And I kept saying this to our teachers and to our principals. These classrooms completely refresh like a classroom air, the air within a classroom, in anywhere from 8 minutes to 12 minutes on average. Some of them much faster than that. The newer the building, they can refresh that building and that classroom in 4 to 5 minutes. So we're constantly refreshing and bringing in. So we opened our dampers to 100%, which came at a cost. Cost us more for electricity. But we opened our dampers at 100%, and we ran those old boilers every day. And the teachers, like I say, they couldn't hear, it got hot, but like we kept them going. and that was a non-negotiable. So you add that to our mitigation strategy, which is the ventilation system, less than 1% transmission rate. Once we, then the masks were removed, and we lessened our contact, or we lessened our social distancing, or not social, physical distancing. We kept our HVAC systems running, but this spring, we saw COVID activity like never before. Like crazy numbers that happened the late spring. We had 2 classrooms at Jefferson. This is how, totally different experience. This happened in May. 2 classrooms at Jefferson. There's about 46 students in that those 2 classrooms, and they share space. We had 23 confirmed positives and 1 teacher when we started to remove the mitigation strategies. Now, nobody likes masks, or very few people like masks. We continued the cleaning protocol. We lessened our physical distancing. So the 2 big changes, we kept the HVACs going. So the 2 big changes were the masking and the physical distancing. When we took those 2 away, we saw activity like never before.
So that suggests, Marty, if I can, this is not necessarily a question, although I'd like for you to reflect on it a little bit. Your school district's management plan, if you would, for COVID, for a pandemic, COVID be whatever type of germ we're looking at, is different than a lot of other school districts that are similar in many respects as far as size, physical plant, so on and so forth. Is OSPI and the Department of Health, or both separately, looking at the difference in school districts' response to COVID safety protocols to figure out what is kind of a universal best practice across the state, no matter what the physical plant or size of the school district is? That would be a useful thing if it's not happening right now.
I'm not aware of that happening. It could be. It could be happening with the Department of Health and the health officers across the state.
Maybe just at the ESD
Yeah,
level.
I'm not, if it happened or if it's happening, I'm not aware of it. But, yeah, so, again, not trying to be political, but, just looking at our experience, when we had lessons learned, if we have a new virus in the future, or, continued COVID experiences, there's some things that we can do. May not make everybody happy, but if we had to, rather than closing a classroom, we have it in our back pocket, working with the county health officer to say, okay, so we're gonna increase the physical distancing and go to mask requirement for a couple weeks, just to keep kids in school. That won't make a lot of folks real happy, but it'll keep our students in school. And I'm here to tell you, our strategies worked, and they worked really well.
That is, as a business organization, just to observe something, that's a worthwhile goal just for student learning. But it also has secondary benefits to the economy of the region for those single-parent households, et cetera, that otherwise might have to take a day off from work and can't, and all those things that we can all imagine.
Yep.
So that is really good news, and I think we ought to.
Have a good one.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Is there somewhere?
Yep.
Yeah.
we'll do.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
lesson learned for us, Jim, like, we're committed to keeping our kids in school.
Good.
And, I used to play poker, so I have a pretty good poker face, but if you'd asked me at the beginning of last year, can you keep it open all year long? I would have, if I was honest with you, I'm not sure. But we did it. We did it through being short-staffed, through, virus running rampant through the community. We kept our schools open, and, for that, I'm really proud of our organization for doing that.
Hey, kudos, we're done. You could go on, if your food is getting cold, we'll see if we can warm it up for you.
I finished, I'm good, thank you.
But I really appreciate your spending some time with us this morning. I learned a lot. And I want to thank you personally, you, your staff, all of the teachers, and all of the parents for pulling together through a difficult couple of years.
Yes.
Well done.
very much so. Thank you, Jim.
We're done, thank you.